Does Ukraine have chemical or biological weapons?
Ukraine has biological research facilities, which, in fact, we are now quite concerned Russian troops, Russian forces may be seeking to gain control of. So we are working with the Ukrainians on how they can prevent any of those research materials from falling into the hands of Russian forces should they approach.
I'm sure you're aware that the Russian propaganda groups are already putting out there all kinds of information about how they've uncovered a plot by the Ukrainians to release biological weapons in the country and with NATO's coordination. If there's a biological or chemical weapon incident or attack inside of Ukraine, is there any doubt in your mind that 100% it would be the Russians that would be behind it?
There is no doubt in my mind, Senator, and it is classic Russian technique to blame on the other guy what they're planning to do themselves.
Here's what he wrote to Tulsi Gabbard. Now, Tulsi Gabbard is a former member of Congress who currently serves as lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army Reserve, and unlike Mitt Romney, has been deployed. Quote, Tulsi Gabbard is parroting false Russian propaganda. Her treasonous lies may well cost lives. Treasonous lies have cost lives, potentially. So you're betraying your country and committing murder. So what exactly did Tulsi Gabbard do? Did she call for a violent overthrow of the United States government? Did she come out and pledge allegiance to Putin? Did she get a Cyrillic tattoo on her neck? No, she didn't. What she said is, we have a problem. Here's how we know. She cited publicly available information and said we should probably deal with that problem. But in case here you have Mitt Romney, who was a consultant, for God's sakes, accusing someone who's been in the Army for nearly 2 decades of treason. People didn't used to talk that way. Treason is a death penalty offense. It's absurd on its face. But if you watch the video that got Mitt Romney to call a fellow American treasonous and suggest she was committing murder, it really makes your head spin. Here's what Tulsi Gabbard actually said that made Mitt Romney accuse her of betraying her own country. Watch.
Here are the undeniable facts. There are 25 to 30 U.S.-funded biolabs in Ukraine. According to the U.S. government, these biolabs are conducting research on dangerous pathogens. Ukraine is in an active war zone with widespread bombing, artillery, and shelling, and these facilities, even in the best of circumstances, could easily be compromised and release these deadly pathogens.
Yeah, she hates our country because she's worried that a pathogen might escape from a biolab and hurt people. There's no recent precedent for that, so she's clearly listening to Alex Jones too much, and she's treasonous. Actually, everything that Tulsi Gabbard said, as you know, is true. It's not a Republican issue, it's not a Democrat issue, it's a factual issue. And even in war, truth is a defense. In fact, it's the only defense. Is it true? And in a free country, you can speak the truth. That right can never be taken away, or else it's not a free country. But by the way, since we're speaking of facts, the director of the U.S. Cooperative Threat Reduction Program, a man who would know, a man called Robert Pope, has confirmed that scientists are keeping Soviet-era pathogens for research purposes in Ukraine. They told us they were destroying them. They should have destroyed them, but they haven't. What could go wrong in an active war zone? And they knew that those pathogens existed and were being experimented upon, researched, and they didn't secure them before the Russians invaded, though they knew the Russian invasion was coming because they told us. And then Tory Nuland, the Undersecretary of State who oversees this disaster, testified under oath that yes, Russian forces might seize those biolabs in Ukraine, and we should all be very worried about that possibility. Over the weekend, CBS News reported that Pentagon officials have confirmed that these biolabs in Ukraine are in fact conducting research on anthrax and other, quote, deadly pathogens.
Pentagon official I talked to this morning said there is no movement of chemical weapons into Ukraine. At least they're not seeing the signs of it. The concern is that the Russians will seize one of these biomedical research facilities that Ukraine has, where they do research on deadly pathogens like botulism and anthrax, seize one of those facilities, weaponize the pathogen, and then blame it on Ukraine, and the U.S., because the U.S. has been providing support for some of the research being done in those facilities.
Okay, so we're a little confused about what all the hyperventilating is about. Now, you just heard CBS say, and you've heard many say, that Russia may seize these biological agents in Ukraine and use them against the Ukrainians and who knows who else. Now, you would pause and think, well, wait a second, if these are Soviet-era weapons, then presumably the Soviets, now called the Russian government, probably have their own, so why would they want to seize stuff they already have? It doesn't actually make a lot of sense, but whatever. You'll notice that the reporter you just saw at the beginning of the clip admits that these pathogens are in Ukraine. They're doing research on botulism and anthrax. So any reasonable person would be concerned by that because there's a war going on. And by the way, why were they funding this in Ukraine in the first place? But that's really a secondary question. Maybe we can get to the bottom of that when the war's over. But Tulsi Gabbard addressed, and only addressed, the danger that innocent people could die because these weapons, apparently these pathogens, these agents, exist in Ukraine. She didn't blame it on Russia. She didn't blame anybody. She just said, this is the thing. Unsecured bioweapons in a war zone are a bad idea. That's not reasonable now? That's treason? Reason isn't part of the way people are thinking now. Everybody in leadership has completely lost the ability to think beyond the next tweet. Who is thinking about tomorrow or next month or 20 years from now? Not one person. And anyone who tries is an agent of Putin.
Now to a story of Russian disinformation that has been quickly embraced and amplified by some in America's right-wing media. When State Department Undersecretary Victoria Nuland confirmed this week that there was bio-research going on in Ukraine, critics say that Tucker Carlson of Fox News took those remarks out of context.
Now you see the Chinese government kind of openly repeating Russian propaganda, for example, about these supposed American biolabs in Ukraine.
This Russian misinformation about biolabs in Ukraine, people on the Trump right who are actually parroting Russian propaganda every day and every night.
These supposed biolabs. Well, the U.S. government says they have biolabs and told us under oath that they're worried about the contents of these biolabs, which they failed to secure, might get into the wrong hands. But it's right-wing Putinite propaganda. We're taking Nuland's remarks out of context. Okay, what's the right context? We asked. No one told us. Robert Pope's remarks, were they taken out of context too? This is insane. There's a problem. Before we even assign blame to the problem, it might be worth thinking through how to fix the problem. But no. Anyone who mentions it should shut up. And not just shut up, be shut up by force if necessary, with jail time. Now, we're going to do something we almost never do. We're going to play you a clip from The View, which is now calling for a Department of Justice investigation into this show and Tulsi Gabbard. Watch.
What Tucker Carlson parrots every night on Fox News, what Tulsi Gabbard is spreading, is actually helping Putin get away with criminal acts against innocent Ukrainian civilians.
And I think DOJ, in the same way that it is setting up a task force to investigate oligarchs, should look into people who are Russian propagandists and shilling for Putin. That's being, if you are a foreign asset to a dictator, it should be investigated. In fact, I remember when Tulsi Gabbard, and I even hate that we're discussing it because I think to myself, who is this woman? How do you not call out something that is repeating false Russian propaganda and that has been brought down?
They used to arrest people for doing stuff like this.
Really? They used to arrest people for saying stuff like this? When did they arrest people for saying stuff like this? And who is they exactly? Well, the former Karen Elaine Johnson didn't tell us. She kept it vague because that way it's a lot more threatening and maybe you will shut up. And again, we hesitate to show clips from that show. It's an IQ killer. But we're making an exception tonight because The View is not alone. A lot of people sound like this. And it's one of these processes where it sounds insane. For sure, I can't believe they said that. And then over time, what sounded crazy the first time you heard it sounds a little more normal. And then 3 weeks into the war, it sounds like probably pretty necessary. Keith Olbermann is always at the cutting edge of things like this. He was watching The View today, doesn't have a lot else to do, and he responded to that segment by writing this on Twitter. They, us, are Russian assets, and there is a war. There's a case for detaining them militarily. Trials are a sign of good faith and patience on the part of democracy. So we're at war with Russia. We must send you to the gulag because freedom. Because a democracy, the one thing democracy doesn't have patience for is dissenting views from its own citizens, particularly citizens who sincerely hope and pray for the best for their own country. Those people must be imprisoned militarily. Tulsi Gabbard knows very well what wise assessments of crises look like. Mitt Romney says she should be arrested for it, but she hasn't been yet, so she joins us tonight. Tulsi Gabbard, thanks so much for coming on. So,
Thank you, Tucker.
What would be your response to Mitt Romney?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to point out here that this is not a matter of disagreement or holding a dissenting view. This is about facts. And this is about the truth. So while Senator Romney and all these different talking heads in the mainstream media are regurgitating Hillary Clinton's slanderous talking points, the facts remain. Number one is they're accusing me of saying that somehow there are bioweapons labs in Ukraine. I've said no such thing at any point. I have said that there are biolabs in Ukraine that have received U.S. support that contain dangerous pathogens, that if those labs are breached, then we in the world are facing a potential future of pandemics, that this is a dangerous crisis that needs to be addressed immediately. These pathogens need to be destroyed. The second thing they're saying is they deny, even though there is a plethora of evidence that exists, they deny that these biolabs are even there, which is shocking to me that we've heard over and over. You played so many clips from people in the mainstream media saying these biolabs, these supposed biolabs, as though there's some fantasy, when over and over and over again, officials from our own government, Department of State, Department of Defense, and so on, are saying these biolabs in Ukraine have dangerous pathogens, and we're very concerned that they may be breached. That's the concern that I've continued to raise, because it is not left or right, Democrat or Republican. This is a serious safety and health and life concern for the American people and people around the world. And so the media is lying. They're not only lying about this. You saw headlines a couple of days ago, Tulsi Gabbard paid off by Russian agent. What the media is lying about is the fact that an American citizen gave my campaign a $59 contribution, coming from a woman I've never met, never talked to, don't know anything about. But somehow they feel justified in saying Tulsi Gabbard is being paid off. The danger in the media lying so blatantly to the American people, these so-called journalists who have a responsibility to the public, it poses a very direct threat to our democratic republic, because they continue to get away with it. They continue to parrot and propagate these lies, and they need to be held accountable. They need to be exposed. Senator Romney, you've called me a treasonous liar simply for stating the fact that there are over 25 U.S.-funded biolabs in Ukraine, which, if breached, would release and spread deadly pathogens across the United States and the world, and therefore they must be secured so that we can prevent any new pandemics from occurring. Now, bizarrely, you claim that securing these labs, or even calling for securing these labs, is treasonous and will lead to a loss of life, when the exact opposite is obviously true. The spread of pathogens is what will cause the loss of life, not the prevention of such a spread. So, Senator Romney, please provide evidence that what I've said is not true and treasonous. And if you cannot, you should do the honorable thing. Apologize. Resign from the U.S. Senate. Evidence of the existence of these biolabs in Ukraine, their vulnerability, and therefore the need to take immediate action to secure them is beyond dispute. Just the other day, the State Department's Victoria Nuland acknowledged that these labs that contain dangerous pathogens exist in Ukraine in her testimony to the U.S. Senate.
Ukraine has biological research facilities which, in fact, we are now quite concerned Russian forces may be seeking to gain control of. So we are working with the Ukrainians on how they can prevent any of those research materials from falling into the hands of Russian forces should they approach.
In a Pentagon fact sheet dated March 11th, there are numerous statements that both directly and indirectly confirm the existence of these biolabs. The United States, through BTRP, has invested approximately $200 million in Ukraine since 2005, supporting 46 Ukrainian laboratories, health facilities, and diagnostic sites. On CBS Face the Nation on March 13th, CBS national security correspondent David Martin said that he'd spoken to a Pentagon official just that morning who told him they're concerned about the existence of these biolabs in Ukraine.
The concern is that the Russians will seize one of these biomedical research facilities that Ukraine has, where they do research on deadly pathogens like botulism and anthrax, seize one of those facilities, weaponize the pathogen, and then blame it on Ukraine and the U.S. because the U.S. has been providing support for some of the research being done in those facilities.
Now, in April of 2020, in refuting Russia's accusations that the U.S. was using biolabs in Ukraine to develop biological weapons, the U.S. Embassy in Ukraine acknowledged that there are U.S.-funded labs in Ukraine working with pathogens for vaccines and other peaceful purposes. In a CNN fact check on March 10th, 2022, there are U.S.-funded biolabs in Ukraine. That much is true. Furthermore, according to the DoD, there are 2 biolabs in Ukraine that have been under Russian control for quite some time. Russia illegally took possession of 2 Ukrainian-owned laboratories that BTRP upgraded in 2014 and continues to deny Ukrainian access to these facilities. So, Senator Romney, you have a choice. Out of pride, continue to deny the truth, or admit that you're wrong, apologize, and resign. Aloha, and remember that without the truth, we can be neither safe nor free.